Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we've got a 2024 Ford F-350 and we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the Firestone heavy duty air compressor. Having a set of airbags on the back of your truck is going to be really helpful when you're hauling those heavy loads, whether it's a load in the bed of your truck. We've got a long bed here so it can haul a lot of stuff, and then or hauling a trailer behind it. This particular owner of this truck owns a farm and he has a lot of gooseneck trailers that he likes to tow, so he really needs that support from the airbags. Well, when you have those airbags from the factory, if you have the airbags just by themselves, you're going to have to air them up and deflate them from manual fill valves on the back of your truck. And if you don't want to carry an onboard or a portable compressor with you all the time, that's where these onboard compressors come into play. You can inflate them and deflate them as you're driving down the road to make the ride much more comfortable for you. Underneath our vehicle, you can see what our compressor looks like when it's installed. One little thing I like to point out to people is it's going to have these little rubber isolators, so it tries to make it so that it floats a little bit, so whenever it's running you don't feel that vibration in your truck. Now, with those isolators being that small, I wouldn't say that it completely gets rid of anything, but if you've got kids or something inside that are trying to sleep and you're trying to run the compressor, it's probably not going to wake them up because it's not super loud on the inside of the cab. Underneath, you'll also see that our ECU is mounted up here. This has got to be one of the smallest ECUs I've ever seen come in a kit, so it makes it nice and easy to find a spot to be able to mount that up. Now, just to show you an example of the type of technology that's built into this ECU, you can see here that it says leak. That's because I let out air out of the manual fill. So it's not just automatically going to top it up back off to 50 PSI if you have a leak. It's just going to tell you that you have a leak so that you can go and find it. But I was able to do that by just letting some air out of that manual fill to show you that feature. With this compressor system, you can use either the remote that's included with the kit, or you can use your cell phone. You can download the Firestone command app, and it's going to allow you to have a couple of presets on there. You do have 2 presets on the remote itself. I recommend setting one to 5 PSI and the other one to whatever the trailer you haul the most is. You can set it to that PSI. That way, if you want to bump it up to, say, 30 PSI, you just push one button, it pumps it up to 30, and you can hook up to your trailer and head down the road. That's one nice thing about having the compressor system on here is that you will get to know the airbags and the compressor a lot more as you're using it. So if you're hauling a skid loader on a trailer all the time, make sure you park it in the same spot where it's safe to tow. And then you're just going to know that your skid loader, when you're towing it on your gooseneck trailer, takes 55 PSI. Bump it up to 55 and your truck's going to drive very, very close to the same every single time. This air compressor is going to have a max PSI rating of 150 PSI. This remote will allow you to let all of the air out to 0, but it is going to give you an error if you do that. It's going to say that there's an insufficient amount of air in the airbags. You will have to have at least 5 in to not get that error. That's why I recommend setting 1 to 5 PSI, so that way you can dump your airbags, and the other one, set it to that most commonly used PSI rating. Now, I do highly recommend pairing this air compressor, because it's a higher rated PSI air compressor, with the Firestone red label bags, because they are also rated at a max PSI rating of 150 PSI. If you pair this compressor with the standard bags, which you totally can, there's nothing wrong with having a stronger compressor than your airbags. Just keep in mind, I would never set your air compressor higher than 100 PSI. A question we get a lot of times here at eTrailer is, how loud is the compressor, and is it safe to use at night in a campground without waking other people up? We're inside of our shop. I'm going to bump it up from 5 PSI to 30, and that is it running down there. You can't even, we've got a fan running because it's a little warm. You can't even hear the compressor over top of the fan. So it's very, very quiet, definitely safe to use at night. Now that we've gone over some of those details, let's go ahead and show you how to get it installed. To begin our installation, we're going to need to get our compressor and our ECU module mounted up to the side of our frame rail. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. If you want to make your own bracket and then mount the bracket up to the frame rail, that way you can take it off, everything off together, you can do that. We found it's easy enough, because these components are so small, to just mount these straight to the frame rail, and then if we need to take them off to get to anything, we'll just take the 4 self-tapping screws out, service it, whatever we need to do, replace it, and then put it back up. I do highly recommend these. The Ford frames are very, very hard, so I do recommend drilling out your holes first And all we did was just took a center punch. We held our compressor up here, center punch where our 4 holes needed to be, and then came back with a drill bit, drilled them out until we got to the size where just the tip of the self-tapper fits in. So basically the self-tapper won't have to tap anymore, and then we can run these in to get our compressor secured. You do get some self-tappers that come in your kit. I would highly recommend picking up some stronger ones from your local hardware store, just because I would hate to see you snap one off in the frame rail. It's very, very frustrating because you have to re-drill all your other holes. So we'll lift our compressor up into place, make sure your wires aren't interfering, and we'll get these ran down. When it comes to the ECU, it is very, very small. You can see there's some tabs here. There's 4 of them. You can use the included zip ties, tie it up to a location that's safe, out of the way, away from anything hot or moving, or you can use 2 more self-tapping screws. I prefer this to be screwed in place because zip ties can give out over time, and the self-tapping screws are likely to not. So we've got our holes pre-drilled up here again. We'll just get these ran down. The next step in our process is going to be running our air lines from the compressor to the ECU, and then from the ECU back to our airbags. We're going to tee it off to each airbag, and then we're going to tee it off again and go back to the back so we have a manual fill. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to come back and show you the route that I took. To run your air lines, you want to start here at your compressor. You're going to have to put this fitting inside the compressor, just thread it in until you can't see the thread locker anymore, which is it's a red liquid that's on there. We'll thread that in, then we'll take a short piece of airline tube, go straight into a T, and then we'll take another short piece, go straight into the ECU. Coming out of the T, you'll want to go back, and then I like to go up over the frame so that it's protected. We're going to be on the back side of the frame, or really more so on top here. Go on top of the frame rail, and then you'll see we kind of travel along the side of the frame rail, zip tying it off to any factory wiring we can find. I always like to go over the shock mount so that we don't ever have to worry about it being damaged. And then you go into another T, come out of the bottom of the T, go into the top of the airbag, and then go out of the T, put some heat wrap over it because we're going over top of the exhaust. Go over to the passenger side, or actually to the driver's side. We'll go into another T, come out of the T bottom, go into the airbag, then go out of the other side of the T, go all the way back to the back of the truck where we're going to use one of the included brackets to mount up our air chuck. And this is what it's going to look like. This is going to be our manual fill if something ever happens. If maybe, I'd say the most common reason of why you would have to use this manual fill is if years down the road your compressor ever locks up, or if you blow a fuse for some reason and you don't have another one of those fuses, this will at least let you air up and air down manually when you don't have access to that compressor. On the other side of our compressor, we're going to need to put our air filter in. Now, depending on where you locate this compressor, if you have it in a nice clean spot, or if you have this end facing the other direction, you can just take this air filter and screw it directly into it. But because ours is facing forward and the air filter holes are right here on the end, I don't want to do that because that could get caked up very quickly, and then it's not going to be able to breathe properly. So we'll take a short piece of tubing, and I'm just going to loop this up over top of the frame once we get it attached. You take the little inlet port that comes in your kit, and we're just going to thread that into the hole. Now moving on to our wiring. This wiring is going to be super simple to get in place. We're going to have a spade terminal here. and a quick connect. The quick connect harness is going to go right here into the ECU. Make sure you're putting it in the correct way. It would be very difficult to put it in the incorrect way, so just be sure that you're putting it up right. We're going to run this eventually along the top here. We're going to try to find some factory wiring, which I can feel up here right now. We'll zip tie that off a little bit later, but we'll take this spade terminal. We're going to connect it right in here. And a lot of times, you know, we'll cut off both of these ends and then heat shrink butt connect them together. But as I've installed a lot of these kits, if you ever have a problem and you're laying underneath the vehicle and the compressor's just not shutting off for some reason, it's not building pressure because you've got a leak or something like that, it is nice to have this quick disconnect. You can reach under here, rip these apart, and then the compressor shuts off. So I do like to leave them if they have these nice ends on them, and I'll just tape that up to make sure that no water or corrosion can get in there. But then we also have the ground from our compressor that we're going to ground right to our frame right here. Now we've got our hole pre-drilled out. I always recommend doing that because these frames being very, very stiff again, you don't want to risk breaking that self-tapper off. Now we're going to take the rest of our wiring and we're going to route it up into the engine bay where we'll have to connect it to the battery. Once we're up in the engine bay, what we're going to do is I like to take one zip tie, tie it off right here so that our wiring does not get pulled back down. Just tie it off to your existing wiring, pull the slack out, tie that off. Then we can take all this extra slack and put it into a little spool. We're just going to tuck this spool back on top of the fuse box there. So we're just going to take that spool, set it there. You want to make sure that your fuse is out of this fuse holder. You just pop the cap off, take the fuse out. It is in there from the factory. And then we're going to have our sensor wire, which does not get hooked up. It just stays under the hood, back under here. Then we're going to have our ground wire and our positive wire. The positive wire you want to take over to the positive post from the battery. We've got this little accessory post that's going to work out great. So it just takes a 10mm socket to get this nut off of here. And that back down, and then we'll take our ground. And you want to ground this to the battery, not to the body of the vehicle, because this is a much more reliable ground. If you ground it to the vehicle, essentially all you're doing is trying to use the vehicle to get back to the battery. So just hook it right up to the battery, and then we'll tighten these back down. After our ground, we ran our wiring harness along the factory wiring. You want to go behind any body mounts or above any body mounts. Run it along the frame rail, zip tied off to all your factory wiring to make sure it's nice, safe, and secure. Then over top of this last body mount, and then up into the engine bay. Now we can take our fuse, put it into our fuse holder. We're going to take our cap, put it back on, and you can find a place to mount this up. We just heard our compressor turn on for the first priming, that's good. But you can take a screw and put this in and mount it up somewhere. I'm not going to do that because it makes it very difficult to get to it. So we're just going to tuck this down in here, and it will be more than fine to travel safely down the road like this. Now that we've got our fuse in place and you know that the compressor turned on, we can get our remote connected. The way that you do it is you're just going to want to press any key on the remote, and then it should automatically connect to the ECU on your frame rail that you mounted down there. I've got the sleep mode on this set to 10 seconds so that it doesn't stay on very long, so the battery lasts a lot longer. You can set it a lot higher if you want, but you can see there it didn't connect right away. That could be because we're outside of the truck or in our building here, that it might not be getting a very good signal. So what you want to do is just stand close to it on the outside when you're connecting it for the first time. It worked for me earlier. If I held it down underneath by it, once it gets used to the spot inside of your truck, you should have no issues with getting this to connect. I want to bump our compressor up to 50 psi, Not only to see if the compressor is working properly, which we can see it is, but also to check our fittings for any leaks. We'll go around with a bottle of soapy water, spray all of our fittings, and make sure that we don't have any rapid air bubbles forming. Well guys, once you checked everything for leaks and you know that you don't have any, now if you do have any leaks, the way that you fix it is you pop that air line out, put a nice clean straight cut on it with a razor blade, and put it back into the fitting. We have seen before where you may have to replace a fitting if it's been pulled out too far or damaged in the past. So just check all those. Once you don't have any leaks anymore, that's going to do it for the installation. Well guys, hopefully this video helped you decide whether or not the Firestone heavy duty air compressor is right for you and your 2024 Ford F-350.